The next slide then just says a little bit more about some of the things that we've been doing. So we've very much tried to take the option, which is to try and really change the way we work. We're also, so all of our main services have been redesigned and reorganised in that period to try to get them more prevention focused and still focused on the needs of residents in the borough. And we've very successfully delivered about £57 million of savings over the last few years through that approach. And we've got about another 40 million savings to deliver over the next 3 years, 19 million further needed next year, notwithstanding the Chancellor's budget. So we've got a range of programmes. We try to stay focused on the community, not get inwardly focused. As you know, in any organisation, if you're short of cash, one of the temptations is to be a bit inwardly focused and just focus on restricting spending. What we've tried to do is remain externally focused, focus on the needs of the borough, on the interests and needs of residents, and to try and meet, to stem as much of that demand for services as we possibly can. And we've also, I think, partly because of values, but also partly because of necessity, more and more of our spending has been focused on more vulnerable residents. If you think about what we do, some of our main responsibilities are homelessness, looked after children, disabled people, elderly people. In those circumstances, those are quite expensive services to run. And in a world where your cash is limited, I think it's natural that a bit more of your cash than it used to do goes on some of those very specialist services for some of our most vulnerable residents. I hope you'll agree that's a sensible response to a difficult set of circumstances that we've found ourselves in. And of course, and I'll come back to this later, we can't be a successful borough without the active involvement of citizens, which is why it's so nice to see so many people here this evening, because whether it's caring for an elderly relative, coming forward to be a foster carer, looking after a local park, looking after a local green space, not dropping litter, recycling, whatever it is, if residents play their part, as I know so many of you do, in the upkeep of the borough, that's hugely to the benefit of the borough, and it helps the council in these testing times. The next slide just amplifies some of those themes a little bit. I'll try and give a couple of examples. So in our adult care of the elderly, care of the disabled, we're spending £15,000 a day less in those services than we were a year ago. And we're not supporting less people than we were. So we're doing things differently to maintain people's quality of life and make prudent use of public money. I think that equates to about £5 million a year that we've saved in that area. Thanks to councillors' efforts and alongside officers, we've also made a big difference to the number of children in care in Ealing. Much lower numbers now of children in care than there were a few years ago. We've got a very different way of working with families at risk of homelessness now than we did. We put much more energy and effort into preventing homelessness than we do with responding to people when they become homeless. You would expect that we've dealt with our own costs as well. So we spent £5 million less on senior management than we did 2 or 3 years ago. We also have a big efficiency programme in the council where we try and make sure that all our processes in the council are as efficient as we can be. None of those things are easy. As an organisation, it means we're smaller than we were. We employ less people than we were. And while I very much value public service and I value public servants, in the world we've been in, I think it has been the right response to reduce the size and the amount of money that we spend on ourselves, as opposed to trying to spend on the public that we serve. We're also using digital differently. I know people have experienced doing more online with the council than they will probably have done. And again, for many residents, that's a positive. Busy lives, they'd rather do things online rather than have to wander into a council office. And it's a more efficient way of doing business. And of course, we try to just keep a tight rein on our spending. So that's the sort of essence of the plan that we've been working through. The next slide just reminds us that our focus remains resolutely on the public, on trying to make a positive difference for Ealing residents. Behind me, you'll see the 3 priorities of our administration, of our councillors have set for officers to work to. So if I work from the right, as you're looking at it, to the left, really important pledge is to build 2,500 new, genuinely affordable homes. Now, normally when I talk to residents, there's absolutely rightly a conversation about what does affordable mean, but I can absolutely guarantee to you that we are working incredibly hard to try and make sure that we are providing homes for rent at a level that ordinary members of the public in Ealing could afford to pay. So a very, very important pledge of 2,500 new homes at decent living rents, which is very important in its own right for a growing borough, but we've got such pressures on families and homelessness that it also, I think, is the right thing to do for that reason. We're also... Sorry, madam. Sorry, I should have said. It's over a 4-year period, 2018 to 2022. There'll be more homes than that built in Ealing during that period, I think, but the 2,500 is the affordable chunk that we as a council are taking very particular responsibility and pride and ownership of. The second area is to do with incomes. So there's a number of ways that a council can influence that. One of the things we know in London is high levels of employment in London and in Ealing, but we know that for too many residents, that doesn't result really in a living income. So we're very focused on that area. We clearly think about that in our pay policies in the council, in terms of the lowest paid people in the council. We also work very hard with our contractors to try and make sure that they pay a decent level of wages, and we try and work with businesses more broadly to make sure that where new business opportunities spring up in the borough, they're paying wherever possible decent living incomes, and they're providing jobs. And that's really a big part of our mission, isn't it? Continuing to develop the borough so there are opportunities for everybody in the borough. And lastly, we want healthy, great places. We want Ealing as a whole to be a healthy, great place, but we want each of our wards and communities in Ealing to be healthy, great places. So that's partly about the public space and the public realm. It's also about encouraging walking and cycling. It's encouraging healthy activity. So that's a really important issue for us as well, and one like all those areas where your contribution as residents really makes a difference. And I think we're in the final furlong. I think if you'll bear with me, this is the Modern and the Council bit. So I've already said there's less of people like me around than there used to be, and this in the last year we spent £4 million by buying better through our procurement. You'll appreciate we're a big, we use a lot of third party, we have a lot of contracts with people. We can make them more efficient. That's a big saving for the council taxpayer. So we saved £4 million in that route, and we've saved £5.5 million through our efficiency programme, which I mentioned earlier, which is all about not making the outcome worse, but making the process slicker that we use to do various things. And it's a continuing challenge, and we continue to work in all these areas for the future. And then, as I mentioned, the government have given us a bit more money than we thought for next year, but we've still got big gaps to fill next year and in future years. The particular pressure we've got at the moment, most councils face 4 big issues: care of the elderly and disabled, looked after children, homelessness, and supporting children with special educational needs. And 3 out of those 4 areas are working well in Ealing. We're not overspending the budget, and we're hopefully delivering a good quality service to the residents. The one area we've got a real problem with at the minute is special educational needs. That's a real challenge for us at the moment. We have many more children coming forward with different sorts of disabilities and special needs and mental health challenges. And the budgets have been going down specifically in those areas over the last few years. So that's a real challenge that we're trying to grip at the moment. So as I mentioned, we've got about £19 million in savings to find for next year. And over 3 years, that comes to about 42 million. So we've got lots more hard work to do as an organisation to meet that challenge. And then I think the next slide is the peroration, is that the word? Peroration, anyway, the last bit of it. And this is just to say what I said at the start, really, which is can't do it without all of you. There is nothing that the council is involved in that the council can solve alone. You know, we have to work with people on whether car use or cycle use or walking is an intelligent choice for them. We've got to work, you know, we really need people's support in their neighbourhoods for elderly people, for vulnerable children, for fostering, for adoption. You know, at its simplest, if people don't litter and fly tip, then we don't have to pick up the litter and the fly tips. People recycling is so important for our environment, for sustainability. I'm really proud that we're now up above 51% of all the waste is recycled in Ealing, which I promise you in an urban environment is a seriously good performance and very good compared to other parts of London. But you can see all of those things the council delivers services, but in none of those areas is the council services alone the answer to the problem. And so your contribution, you know, is hugely valued by myself and by everybody who's engaged with the council. And we've got a website which briefly appeared there that you can register interest in volunteering as well, but we can show that to you again. So I sensed earlier that there's probably one or two questions in the room, and that I've got very helpfully seen the other issues that have been raised. So I'm very happy to do what I can to help answer any of those.
Thanks very much, then. Well, let's see how many people want to ask questions. So can I get an idea of how many people want to ask questions? Okay, yes. I'll just take them in groups of 2 or 3. Is that okay, Paul? That's better. Starting on the left. So, okay, Kathy. Yeah.
Yes. I appreciate what you're saying about people contributing and the budget saying. But I'm paying £23 an hour for care. That's 1 hour per day times £23, 7 days a week. The carer receives £8.50 for the job. Now, I can't reconcile what I'm paying. I'm not grumbling about the amount I'm paying. If I'm getting an NVQ3 level carer, that's fine. They're not. Some of them don't even have NVQ1. So is it the agency that the council uses taking all that profit, because the carer's not getting it? They can't get parking permits, so because I'm in a zone CPZ.
If it's okay, madam, I'll steer away from particular circumstances. I'm very happy to talk about your specific position if that's helpful at the end. So I'll try not to bog us down in too detailed a conversation on care, but there's 3 or 4 different ways in which people might arrange care in Ealing. One might be arranged through the council. A second might be arranged in the market, as it were. People might just pay for their own care from an agency that's registered. And there's a third way of getting care, which is people do it, if you like, in the informal economy, I suppose you might describe it. So there's 3 different ways that care gets arranged in Ealing. I think the council route, if people who come by the council, admittedly we don't fund care for everybody because there's a means test attached to it, but we have a very strong relationship with the people who provide care through to the residents via the council, and certainly £23 an hour is not what the cost of care is if the council arranges it. Well, okay. Well, okay. Well, then I'll have to look at your particular circumstances, because I see all the rates that we pay for care, and we don't pay. I've not seen any agency that we use charging £23 an hour. So it'd be really useful to get you a bit of feedback on that, so I can follow that up if it's all right. Now, on the substantive point, however, so one issue is the overall cost of care. And obviously, if you're paying for care yourself, it's a very, very significant cost, but that's the law of the land. That's the way it's organised at the moment. Then there's the issue of the pay of the care workers. Now, nothing could be more important, I think, in terms of making Ealing a civilised place, and it's such an important responsibility. And that's why I said earlier that one of our big focuses as a council is trying to help people in low-income jobs getting the best possible pay that we possibly can. So we work year in, year out with care providers so they're transparent about their costs and also transparent about what it is that they pay their frontline staff. And we always try and encourage the agencies to operate in a way, the organisations to operate in a way that gives a fair pay. Notwithstanding that, these are minimum wage jobs often. That is the reality of the care sector at the moment. And there are some things we can do about that in Ealing, but in truth, there's a national solution needed to this, because the same issue in Ealing is the same issue in Brent, it's the same issue in Northumberland, and as a nation we've got to do something differently about that. And increasingly it's on the national agenda, I suppose, which might be an encouragement. On the issue of developments and the finances of development, so there are three sorts of income that the council might get from a particular development. If it's a housing development, then clearly it's very likely people will live there and pay council tax. So that'll be a source of income for the council if it's housing. If there are businesses in the development, then the businesses will pay business rates. And again, I won't bog you down in the minutiae. There's a complicated national formula about how much business rates get retained by Ealing Council and how much go to the National Exchequer. But we still benefit if a business is in Ealing, because they'll pay business rates. So both of those things, council tax and business rates, are pretty permanent sources of income that we can use to try and balance the budget on an ongoing basis. Then there's a third source of income we get from development sometimes, and that is what's called Section 106. Basically, if a developer wants to develop a part of the borough, then as part of the deal, the council will there'll often be a payment from the developer, but that's usually attached to something very specific, to do with what you might call the social infrastructure, something to do with the road, something to do with the pavement, something to do with the transport, maybe contribute to the cost of a school if it's a very big development and there's need for new school development, so it'll be contributing to the wider infrastructure that's needed to make that development sustainable. That's very welcome money, but that's not money we can really use to balance the budget overall for the council, because it's tied to a particular sort of thing. I hope that helps a little. There are lots of every development in Ealing is a bit different. If the development is on council land, then clearly we have a judgment to make in any negotiation about the value of that land in that deal, which might range from us just asking the developer to pay market value of that land, right through to us having a negotiation that says, in exchange for social housing that the developer doesn't make a profit from, then you think about land as part of that arrangement. But obviously most development in Ealing doesn't happen on council land. We don't own most of the borough. Most development in Ealing is just privately developed.
Well, congratulations on your presentation. It's slick and professional as one would expect. But you did use a lot of "we hope" and "we encourage", and you do claim that you've saved money by working smarter and cleverer and better and encouraging your contractors to do the same. But nowhere in your presentation is there a satisfaction survey. Now, I'll give you one example that everybody knows about. I don't know about care of the elderly and the other things you mentioned, but the state of our streets is uniformly grime. There are packages of rubbish. At this time, if you walk through Ealing, any part of Ealing, there'll be piles of rubbish. Should have been picked up by 8 o'clock. It will still be there when we leave. Now, you may have saved £1 million. I've been told it's £1 million over Daisy May reduction. But we're paying because the satisfaction is appalling. And if it's appalling in street cleaning, what is it like in home care? And the other essential services that you've spoken of.
Okay, and then Tony. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Go ahead, just briefly, Tony, if you can.
I really can't see how it works out, because at the moment you've got developments going on which is increasing the strain on the infrastructure, and you're bringing in people who can afford these new developments, the high-rise blocks that nobody wants, which create their own environmental problems. And you're not solving the problem for the homeless, because the so-called affordable, even the affordable, people can't afford. You're not helping anybody. You're creating more problems, because people are going to come in from outside who can afford those stuff.
I'll start with the gentleman at the back. So if I said we hope too often, I apologise, because many of the things that I was describing are achievements we've already made. So lots more elderly people cared for, less looked after children, less homeless families. They're real, genuine achievements where people's lives have been affected for the better. On the satisfaction point, so we run, I think very transparently, satisfaction surveys of local residents. We run an overall one for the borough about all the things to do with the borough and to do with council services. We also have a specific survey for older people and disabled people in receipt of adult social care. And there are many, many bits of data. It's on the council website. It went to the council's cabinet, I think, a few months ago, Councillor Rye. So it's a little while, but it's all there and in the public domain. And the gist of it was that people think Ealing's a really great place. Satisfaction with the council is where it was 10 years ago. So we've not seen a dip in satisfaction with the council. And with many services like adult care and children's care, we've seen increases in satisfaction. But sir, you're absolutely right. People are not as happy as they were with the public realm, with the environment, with the local, the public spaces in the borough. So that's a very serious issue, and it's something we take very seriously. The primary thing we're doing at the moment, we're doing lots of things to do with fly tipping and recycling and so forth, but we're making a big change. So for many years now, the borough has had a contracted out service with a company called Amy. We're not satisfied with the way that service has been running in recent times or for some time, and councils a little while ago took the decision to bring that service back more directly under the control of the local authority. And we believe when we achieve that next year, that gives a much more strong foundation for us to run efficient and effective services, and we know how important those services are to residents.
Confirm what that date is. Yeah. When is the changeover?
At the moment, that change is due to happen to be finished in July of next year. So the transition to the new arrangement is supposed to start next April. And it's supposed to conclude next July, when the service will be much more directly run by the council at that point.
The reply that the residents get is we're changing contractors. We know we're changing contractors, but that doesn't mean that the place isn't a mess until then. Just because they don't seem to want to commit to their obligations under contract.
Well, we're not. I don't think anybody's satisfied with the quality of the job the quality of the way things have worked, and that's the reason councillors, I think, have taken the decision that decision. There's actually a report at the council's cabinet the week after next, I think, where this is all described, what we're doing. And in addition to that, there's new resources going into that service as well, because we really need to make a difference for the reasons that you say. In terms of how high-rise developments and affordability. So, from the moment, from the start to the finish of development is often many, many, many years, as you will know. Planning permission, all sorts of things have to get done, consultation before something gets built. But I can tell you the big developments that we're working on at the moment in Ealing, that will be the kind of things that will be going through the planning system recently, or just in the future, or things coming up down the line. The majority of those now are very much targeted on people lower incomes and flats for the rent. And that's because we've rightly set ourselves to target that 2,500 homes target. And just to give you an illustration, so the average 2-bed rent in Ealing is about £2,000 a month. So that's roughly what people are paying for an ordinary 2-bed accommodation in the borough. Most of the flats in these new developments are somewhere between £400 and £700 a month. So I'm not saying, everything's a challenge. I'm not saying anything's easy, but you can see that as a result of the council's intervention, ordinarily you'd be paying £2,000 a month for a flat, 2-bed flat. Because of our intervention and because of these new developments, we're able to provide rents that about £400 a month, ranging up to about £700 a month. So we're taking a big chunk out of that cost for people, and we're absolutely targeting it at families and individuals who couldn't get on the housing ladder any other way in Ealing. So it's a genuine attempt, sir, to make a difference to people at the lowest end of the market.
I must correct that. That's absolutely not true. It's only a small minority of flats at that rate. You agreed to build 28,000 new homes in the next 10 years, okay? The average salary in Ealing is just less than 23,000 a year. The most affordable flats we've seen advertised in West Ealing, you would need 44,000 a year to be able to afford them. Very few of them are shared accommodation, very few of them are rental. I really don't think that's true at all. It really isn't true. Most of them are direct sale, market rate flats. 2 bedrooms, 600,000, 1 bedroom, probably 350, 400,000.
So the national government has set Ealing a target, and the Greater London Authority has set Ealing a target. So there are targets being set for Ealing in national and London-wide planning that are for many, many more homes to be built than we've built before in Ealing. So that's just a fact that's part of the world that we live in. And I don't say that, I neither say that in a positive or negative voice. It is a reality, though, that London as a city does need more homes. And it's also a reality that in an already reasonably pretty densely populated city, one of the ways, I'm not saying it's the only way, but one of the ways you cope with that is by building upwards in certain defined areas. And the council's planning policy sets out the areas of the borough that are likely to have much denser accommodation. Now, across the board, across all the development in Ealing, as I mentioned before, much of that development is privately driven, and in some of those developments there are more homes for private sale, just for market, at market rates. What I'm saying is the ones where the council are taking the closest input, where the council's taking the closest control, we are targeting our efforts on building 2,500 affordable units for people. And as I'll say it again, between £400 and £700 a month, not the £2,000 a month that is the common picture in an ordinary private development. So I'm not suggesting there aren't still other developments in Ealing. I'm focused on the ones where the council's got most direct involvement.
I'm a teacher and I'm also a personal tutor. I found a number of parents approaching me because a lot of their children there's a lot of social, educational needs and special needs are coming to me with various different problems because they're not, whatever's happening in school, they're not actually reaching their academic ability. Is there something, the parents are worried about the funding, that there's no funding, and some of the children have now become young adults and they've just lost in the system, and their educational needs are not being met. So they're having to pay out to me for this, and it's not just everyday, like maths, English. There's other things, problems of, addiction to Xbox. I mean, it's a range of things that I'm having to deal with. Is there any kind of funding that the council are offering to help these parents and the children?
Okay, so that one, and Arthur.
You mentioned the disabled 4 times. But we have 3 Elizabeth Line stations where vast amounts of money has been spent bringing people up from platform level to pavement level. 3 of those stations, my nearest ones, have no drop-off and pick-up for the registered disabled, let alone the rest of us who may end up partially disabled or disabled because of luggage, because of recent foot injuries, etc. Why the hell is this? Why the hell is one side of the government spending out vast amounts of money trying to get to people, and Ealing Council don't want anyone to drop them off or pick them up anywhere near the ticket office? And why bicycles put in there instead? Now, we never voted for this. It wasn't on the Labour Party's agenda, but now we find it foisted upon us. And us who are old, who need to get to those stations, are prevented by that. I can go to St Pancras and there they are, all lined up nicely for them. Why in Ealing is it so different and against the law?
So to try and pick up both questions. On the first one, I think I mentioned children with special educational needs is a growing issue in Ealing. There are 4 things, briefly, that are creating a challenge for us. One is our growing young person's population. We just naturally have more young people than we did. Secondly, it's the number of children, thanks to the wonders of medical science and so forth, who are living much longer with profound disabilities, profound mental health challenges, profound learning disabilities. Thirdly, the government has changed the rules, so we now have a broader offer. The public sector is supposed to offer more to these families. And the fourth area is that the resources available, there's a very special fund that the government sets aside for these kinds of cases, and that fund has been reducing over the course of the last 9 or 10 years. All of that makes it quite a difficult set of circumstances. But we will do the right thing as an authority, and indeed we have a legal duty. So if people with such needs, if children and families with such needs approach us, we absolutely will make provision for them, and we will actually absolutely spend the resources necessary to deal with their needs. So you should encourage them to get in touch with the council if they have those kind of challenges. In terms of the sort of drop-off points, well, I know the Ealing Broadway case reasonably well. In fact, only the other day I was looking at some of the consultation responses and some of the conversation that we've been having about that. So I think so. If I step back for a moment from the rights and wrongs of the issue that the gentleman raises, I think you could understand why public transport and cycling are important issues for the borough. So I hope people at least understand the point of trying to make the borough cycle friendly, trying to make it easy to get on your bicycle and get to a station, and even take the bicycle into the station if needed, and have somewhere to park to put that bicycle. I hope you'll understand why we really want to make sure that public transport is accessible to connect up with our train stations. That's partly because so many people travel on public transport in London, and we have a decent network of public transport. It's partly as well, of course, for environmental reasons that we do, I think, want to do everything we can to work with residents to think about making that change from car to bicycle or public transport wherever possible. So I absolutely respect the gentleman, Mr. Breen, who not really in sympathy with our view, but I hope you at least understand why we're thinking about public transport.
Law.
Yeah.
And your job is to follow the law.
Yeah.
It's
so,
the Disability Act.
So
On
the specific point that you make, we've run a consultation around access to train stations. We've had lots and lots of feedback. You won't be surprised to know, sir, that some of the feedback has been on the very issue that you've just described, and we're considering that at the moment, and we're in further discussion with Transport for London about how together we can get the right balance at the stations. But your point is well made, and it's not that we're not alive to the point that you make, but I hope you understand some of the wider pressures as well. And one way or another, our job is to look through the consultation, look at where people are, the issues that people have expressed, and try and get a solution that works in the round.
I'm talking to Boris Johnson. It is law. It is the law. Look at the law, please.
Sorry, but I didn't feel that you answered the question I asked. Is there any funding, or is there any way that the council work with someone like myself to help these parents and the children?
Well, sorry, yes, there is funding. I think, I mentioned the council's overspending very substantially in this area, so we are spending a tremendous amount every year on children with special educational needs. So yes, there is funding. B, that funding goes on all sorts of care and support for young people, and I'm very happy to have a conversation, madam, if you've got particular skills and experience, and there are particular services where you might play a part, then of course very happy to have that conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I think everyone has had a chance to ask their question. Thanks very much, Paul, for